All right, Johnny McGonigal. I'm Bob Flounders. That's right, he is Johnny McGonigal. It's the Blue White Breakdown. Johnny, I don't know where you want to start because we kind of told the fans last week that things were going to change on like an hourly basis during the month of December for Penn State with the bowl game, with opt outs, with just crazy recruiting, and it's been probably even crazier than I'm sure you thought. But it's just been like, I guess relentless would be a good way to describe the amount of activity that's happened since last Tuesday. So since I was off for a couple of days and you did all the heavy lifting, where would you like to start, Johnny?
Bob, you said that maybe more than I would expect. This is kind of what I expected. Is the transfer portal opened last Monday for FBS players. You've got a couple of impending NFL decisions that Penn State players had, and we discussed Joey Porter last week. Well, Parker Washington made his decision. You've got an early signing period that is, we're barreling towards it here, December 21st, and so that there's a few open spots in that class, and James Franklin is going to try to fill them. And they added a couple of guys this week, and right before we were supposed to record this podcast at 12:15 on Tuesday, and we're recording it a little bit later because they got a guy in, and so. Yeah, it's been a busy time, but so far it's been, overall, I think a good busy for Penn State, in terms of the recruiting end and wrapping up that 23 class, looking ahead to 24. Losing Parker Washington hurts. So maybe let's start with that,
Mm-hmm.
and then just kind of work from there if you want.
Yeah, that sounds great. So Parker was a guy that we were wondering. The reason it was never a talent issue, right, with him maybe going to the NFL draft. It was a late season injury issue that happened prior to the Rutgers game. I'm pretty sure it happened on the practice field a couple days before the Rutgers game. We don't know the severity of it, but you hear things. But we thought maybe he might come back just because you don't know how long it's going to take him to get ready to maybe show the NFL teams how healthy he is if it was a significant injury. But late last week, he declared for the draft. 3-year player at Penn State, productive since his very first game, that Indiana debacle when they lost in overtime. He actually caught a touchdown in that game, but he just a tremendous player, great slot receiver, built like a running back, great hands, great routes, a number one receiver, no doubt this year. But Penn State, is going to be a little bit short at wideout for the bowl game, and they're going to be next year. They're going to need some guys to step up with Parker and Mitchell Tinsley not coming back.
Yeah, this is one that it hurts. It hurts Penn State, going into 2023 when you've got Drew Aller, heir apparent quarterback, taking over for Sean Clifford. You'd love to have a number one guy guaranteed, locked in.
Yeah.
And that's what Parker Washington would have been for Penn State next year. That's what he was for them this year. He produced like a number one, even behind Jahan Dotson last year. In 2020, a 9-game season, he had 6 touchdowns and was a freshman All-American last year, over 800 yards behind Dotson. And this year, it took a little bit for him to get going. But once he did, it was like, okay, this is Parker Washington. This is what Penn State has. They've got a tremendously talented, strong-handed, just secure the ball and go kind of guy. And they're hard to find. They really are. Someone that you can really rely on. That 179-yard performance against Ohio State, 11 touches, opposite, guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., that really boosted his stock quite a bit. And then, he gets injured. And that was the big question is he going to come back and just rehab? And but you know what? He's got plenty of tape out there. And I understood it both ways. I'm sure Penn State fans do as well. It's a tough one, but I think he's going to make an NFL team really happy. We talked to Taylor Stubblefield, Penn State wide receivers coach. It ended up being, timing wise, looking back on it, the week of within a few days of Parker's injury, before the Rutgers game where he wasn't on the travel roster. But Stubblefield, I asked him about Parker, and he said that, look, at the next level, you have to be able to run, be able to get open, catch the ball. He does all those things extremely well. And then when you're a guy with his size, he's 5'10", you have to be elite. And he said that his hands are absolutely elite. And, if given the opportunity to play at the next level, he's full confidence in Parker to do that for an NFL team. And that's what he's going to end up doing. And it hurts Penn State because they don't have him. They don't have Mitchell Tinsley now. And you lose your top 2 wide receivers going into next season.
Yeah. So 2 more things, I think, for Parker, and then we can move on maybe to some recruiting news if you like. But so long term, right? So long term, or let's go short term. Keandre Lambert-Smith really becomes the guy that Penn State's going to need something from in this bowl game. Trey Wallace is a guy that I know that Penn State likes. Fortunately for Penn State, as we talk about this, I have to make that clear. As we talk about this, Johnny, all 3 of their tight ends are still around and planning to play in the Rose Bowl. And the way that Penn State uses their tight ends, more often than not, there's going to be at least 2 of them on the field. All 3 of them can catch the ball. Theo Johnson, his ability to stretch the field as a 260-pound tight end is going to help out, I think, in the short term. Brenton Strange is obviously a very good receiver, ability to run after the catch. And even Tyler Warren, I think, has come on in the month of November. There's some help there, but they're going to need some wideouts, right? They're going to need Keandre Lambert-Smith, Trey Wallace. There's some other guys, maybe Malik Mega. I know they like some young receivers. Omari Evans is a guy that played a lot of football, a lot of snaps, maybe not a lot of statistics. So I think it'll be fascinating to watch these practice sessions play out and see what they can do in the bowl game. The other thing I would just throw out there, we could probably talk about it as well, is I think there's absolutely no question that Penn State will address wideout in the transfer portal. I know that they like some receivers, and the fan base might want to just keep that in mind. It might not just be young guys stepping up in 2023. It might be some guys that have done some things at other schools that can fit in quickly and assimilate quickly, maybe for Penn State, because they've had some success with Mitchell Tinsley doing some things, and I'm sure they're not done with the wideout position in the transfer portal.
Yeah, with regards to the Rose Bowl, I agree with you. It's almost nice in a sense that Penn State has had a couple of games already without Parker Washington in the starting lineup, and they kind of know what they have. Again, if all 3 tight ends end up playing in Pasadena, they've got quite a strong group there. Can lean on that. Can also lean on Keandre Lambert-Smith ability after the catch. I like what Trey Wallace has shown. You mentioned Amari Evans, a true freshman who has played quite a bit for this Penn State team. Liam Clifford is another one to keep in mind. But yeah, you have to figure that James Franklin and Stubblefield and these coaches knew what Washington was going to do, given their activity in the portal and how they've been pushing for wide receiver help, veteran experience, wide receiver help. They have not been bashful about the offers that they've been, extending to these guys. Penn State is already a finalist for Jimmy Horn Jr. from South Florida, had over 500 yards last year, an electric guy, also a kick returner. He's announcing his commitment on Christmas, I believe, so keep an eye on that. Dante Cephas is a kid from, Christmas, commitments are just the best. They're always great. At least he says, hey, I'm going to be committing on Christmas, so we can pre-write something and have something ready to go in case that ends up happening. But Dante Cephas is one to keep an eye on as well. Pittsburgh kid from Penn Hills, went to Kent State, had over 700 yards last year. He's a guy that has gotten a lot of offers elsewhere too. It's not like just Penn State is after these guys. It's colleges across the country, but he's one to keep an eye on. And Caden Prather as well from West Virginia just entered the portal. I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Someone who Penn State was all over in his recruitment. Dante Thornton, who from Oregon, who was previously committed to Penn State. Long-winded way of saying, Bob, there are a lot of wide receivers in the portal, and there's a lot of guys that are getting interest from Penn State, and a lot of guys that Nittany Lions would love to have. And you want to surround Drew Aller and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, make sure they're not the only focal points of this offense. You want multiple avenues and multiple ways to attack next year and support those young guys as much as possible. They already have a good base on the offensive line. They've got good running backs. They need to bring in a couple of more experienced receivers, and I think you'll see that over the next couple of weeks.
All right, Johnny, let's transition to some recruiting news. And why don't we just start with the most recent bit of news? McDonough School in Maryland has been very good to Penn State over the years. Some really good players have developed at Penn State from McDonough. They do a great job at preparing players to get to the major college level. Curtis Jacobs, PJ Mustipher, probably at the top of the list of Penn State guys who were standouts, just standouts at McDonough. I know I'm missing a couple, but the reason I bring up McDonough is the most recent recruiting news involves, I believe, a defensive player, Mason Robinson, from McDonough, who was originally, I think, thinking about going to another Big Ten program, but it looks like Penn State has gotten him to flip. What do you think it means? What do you know about him? And what do you think, Johnny, about Penn State's success with the McDonough program?
Yeah, there's a couple of names that were on the tip of your tongue, Bob. Devon Ellies and obviously 5-star defensive end, Nittany Dennis Sutton.
Of course.
Signee last year and played a lot of ball for Penn State this year. And those four guys, really productive players from private school down in Maryland. And Penn State gets another one in Mason Robinson, who was previously committed to Northwestern. He committed to Northwestern back in May. He had interest from Georgia, Oregon, Michigan, a handful of Power 5 programs. Ultimately, his top 5 when he committed were Northwestern, Penn State, Pitt, South Carolina, and Virginia Tech. Was committed to Northwestern for 6 months. And then Northwestern went 1-11, and they fired their defensive coordinator, and they fired their defensive line coach. And so, Robinson ends up, visiting Penn State over this past weekend, decommits from Northwestern on Monday afternoon, and then Monday night hosts James Franklin, John Scott Jr., the defensive line coach for Penn State, and then co-defensive coordinator Anthony Poindexter at his family's home in Maryland. It's like, okay, well, you kind of see where this one's going, right? And sure enough, he commits to Penn State, the 4th defensive lineman added to the 2023 class, 21 members overall. But yeah, he's the second one in as many days for this class. John Scott doing some work, bringing in Joseph Mapoye as well, a 4-star, 3-star edge rusher, depending on where you look, committed on Monday as well.
I'm glad you pronounced it correctly.
That's how you pronounce it. Apologies to Joseph. We'll learn. We'll learn when he gets.
In all seriousness, I was just getting caught up to speed, and I was looking at that name, and I was like, boy, I'm gonna lead Johnny into this, and hopefully he's. I know he wrote a couple of stories. Hopefully he's got that pronunciation down. To me, it sounded great. That makes sense to me. But yeah, 2 defensive linemen, late adds to what looks like a really, really solid class. The signing day will be, a week from, I think it's the 21st, so a week from this coming Wednesday. And they have a lot of talented players, a lot of talented offensive linemen, or at least 2 in the class. Should be interesting to see if anything else will happen. But James Franklin said after the Michigan State game that they were going to hit the recruiting trail and they were not done and they had a lot of stuff to do. But managing the roster, managing the player defections to the NFL, working to add players in the transfer portal, trying to keep players from entering the transfer portal and doing recruiting. I saw he had some visits in the middle of the country or out west. Actually, I think he and Yursich visited a 4-star quarterback prospect, I think last week. I just want to know, it's impressive watching a college staff work the month of December now more than ever, just because I know the regular season must be with the practice work and the prep work and the game work. It's got to be crazy, but it almost feels like December is as crazy now, Johnny, or it might be crazier.
And I'm sure it's crazy too for like the GAs and the offensive analysts and those guys who are, still in state college. And they're the ones right now that are really prepping for Utah for the Rose Bowl. They're getting the cut-ups ready and, they're having everything prepared for when, James Franklin and the rest of his staff come back from the recruiting trail and they can really dive into it. When we talked to James after the Rose Bowl announcement, he was saying that, there are practices going on right now, but they're more developmental, more like spring camp kind of style practices. And it's not like they're, never in state college now, but they are on the recruiting trail. They're trying to not only add to this 2023 class, but they're trying to keep guys from leaving that class too, because there's a lot of talented players in this group. And just as Penn State, they flipped Mason Robinson from Northwestern.
Yeah.
There's schools down south trying to flip, their safeties, again, from Penn State. There was I believe it was Conrad Hussey, 4-star safety, making a visit to Florida State recently. There's, schools across the country are trying to come after everyone's classes. And it's such a just a high wire act at this point. It's really just difficult trying to balance everything, I'm sure. But that's what they're getting paid for, right? They're getting paid for all these different things that are going on right now. It's a crazy time in college football. But soon enough, they're going to get to practicing and getting to look at the Utes. And I feel like that might be like, once you hit the signing day period over on this, December 21st, that's kind of when they can kind of let out an exhale a little bit. But the portal is still going to be going on, and they're after a lot of guys, not just wide receiver. They're after an offensive lineman to bring in and provide help there. In the secondary as well. Joey Porter Jr. going to the NFL. You like what you have at corner, but I think they would love to bring in another one. So there's just plenty to keep an eye on right now.
There sure is. Penn State had some success, obviously, with Johnny Dixon in the transfer portal, a South Carolina corner that made an impression in 2021, but made a huge leap in 2022 just as a corner. He was more of almost a special teams guy, I think, in his first year. But, that's the other thing I think that Penn State has in its favor as they pursue kids in the transfer portal. They can point to the recent people that they've added and say, look, if you come to Penn State, if we think highly enough of you to come to Penn State, we're going to carve out a role for you, and you're going to have some success. More, the chances are that you're going to really be able to improve as a player at this level, at the NFL level. And I would imagine James and his coaches are using that as a selling point. Johnny, do you expect between now and the 21st, not that they would lose anybody, but do you expect them to add some significant talent to the 2023 class?
Stuff. I think they have a spot or two open at this point. Robinson coming in and Mupoye, two big ads for them, and they wanted to strengthen that defensive line room, and I think they did that overall with 4 guys now in the class there. Do they bring in a running back? I think that's a position that they might look at. Kevon Lee, he said, he tweeted, it was a month ago now at this point, with, hey, I'll be back from injury and all that, but he's still a guy that I wouldn't be surprised, again, if he entered the portal. And then you're left with 2 scholarship running backs right now, and Nick Singleton and Patron Allen, walk-on Tank Smith behind him, with Lee being out due to injury. London Montgomery is from Scranton, 4-star recruit in the 2023 class, but he, at the beginning of his season, he missed his entire senior year with a torn ACL, and those things can be difficult to come back from. So I think they would still like to add another running back to this class. We'll see if they're able to do that. Cameron Wallace is a name to watch in that regard. But yeah, I don't think you're going to get, like a 5-star ad or anything like this at this point. Maybe in February, because even though this is essentially the recruiting deadline, not the recruiting deadline, but this is essentially signing day now. It's the early signing period, but James Franklin and every other coach in college football will tell you this is the essentially the really signing day now. But they can still, guys can still go ahead and sign in February too. So there's still time. And as the portal churns, and as you maybe lose a couple guys or gain a couple guys, your roster math, you have to do that. Like, as a coach, it's tough to keep up with, but you have to stay at that 85 limit. And so really, as that kind of churns through and roster attrition naturally happens, I think then you'll have a clearer picture to see, hey, can I bring in another 2023 prospect in in February? So we'll have to wait and see on that. Maybe I'm thinking another guy, maybe 2 before the 21st, but nothing crazy.
Got it. It's the blue-white breakdown. Johnny McGonigal, Bob Flounders. Johnny, you mentioned a couple of Penn State's freshmen that made an impact, some bigger than others. The running backs, obviously, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. Denai Dennis Sutton is a player that you just know, as he, with some winter conditioning work done, maybe, he could have just a gigantic 2023 as an edge rusher. Drew Shelton kind of had to come of age in the month of November with Olu Fashanu out as a true freshman, played left tackle, could be headed to right tackle now that Olu's coming back. We don't know. Um, Abdul Carter, obviously a true freshman that certainly didn't play like a true freshman. But I guess my question to you is, because I know you had a vote for national all freshman teams, is when you look at the impact that Penn State's true freshmen made in 2022, it's hard to imagine many schools getting a bigger lift than Penn State did. And I know it had to influence you a little bit when you put together your votes for that team.
I actually didn't have a vote for the freshman team.
Oh.
I had a vote for like a bunch of other stuff.
I thought you said you had a freshman vote.
No, I had an All-American for the AP All-American team.
It's still a fair question, even though you didn't have a vote. The freshmen that Penn State had this year, I mean, a bunch of them I know got I know they got some recognition, and deservedly so. But that I don't ever remember having that many freshmen impact a season at Penn State. And it might be a product of the times, Johnny, but it also might just be a product of just how talented that class was.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both those things, what you mentioned, the product of the times and also the talent. Last year, there were only, a couple, two or three freshmen who burned their red shirts and played. And this year, you've got half the class that burned their red shirt and played. You talk about Drew Shelton at left tackle, getting him that kind of experience. It's nice to have Olu Fashanu coming back now, but to have Shelton have that experience moving forward, not just for 2023, but 2024, I think that's huge. Abdul Carter is a freak. I was not surprised at all to see all of these, freshman All-American teams come out, a bunch of different outlets coming out with them, and seeing Abdul Carter on there, as well as Nick Singleton. But then you could also toss in Kaytron Allen if you wanted to. Like these freshman All-American teams could have had just Penn State's two running backs as their freshmen, because normally you do running backs and three wideouts. Kaytron Allen has had an incredible season. He has just really surpassed my expectations. I knowing, and seeing the film and talking to people, you got the sense that Singleton was going to break out and be that kind of home run hitter and be that kind of talent, even that early for Penn State. You got the sense that he was going to be that good. But Kaytron Allen, the way that he put on weight and put on good weight and just looked like a veteran out there. We talked about it so much, about his patience, but about his power too. And so to see that so early in a career, for multiple guys in this class, it gives you hope as a Penn State fan, moving forward that, hey, if they just hit on these guys in the 22 class, let's look at what they have in the 23 class and see, hey, are these some of these guys able to come in and make similar impacts and develop that quickly? And you tip your cap to Penn State's staff as well, guys that will be sought after not just this offseason, but in future off seasons as head coaching jobs and other jobs elsewhere. But you tip your cap to everyone in that program, in that building, for what they were able to do with this freshman class.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave anybody out. Zane Durant, I think, even though the numbers might not look that spectacular at the end of the season, for him to be able to play as a true freshman defensive tackle, and to play well. I mean, they're never going to have huge stats, right? Unless they're Aaron Donald. But I mean, he had a great first year. I know they like Cam Miller, the corner, and I'm sure moving forward, that's another guy I think Penn State's going to be awfully excited. They just have a lot of freshmen, I think. Omari Evans, he could be a guy in the bowl game that, it might not be the volume of catches, but he is a potential big play threat anytime he's on the field. There's so many freshmen that I think are poised to play even bigger roles in 2023. Kudos to James and his staff and the development. Johnny, let me just close with this to wrap it up. As we sit here right now, which program has been hit harder by NFL draft declarations? Is it Penn State with Parker Washington and Joey Porter, or is it the Utah Utes, who are going to be without two extremely talented players for this Rose Bowl game? Two of the very best players at their positions in the country.
I think it's Utah, because these are two guys that I put on my first team AP All-American ballot. Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, ended up being a third team All-American for the AP, and then Clark Phillips, who was a first-team corner. These are two guys that are just so integral to Utah's success and to them winning the Pac-12 this year. You look at Kincaid and his performance against USC, 16 catches, 234 yards in October, that upset at Utah. And Phillips was just so consistent this year, was targeted a bunch, and had, I believe it was 3 or 6 interceptions. I always get mixed up because I had him and Devin Witherspoon, the Illinois corner, on my AP All-American team as well. So, but those two guys were really good this year. It was tough to leave. Kalen King, who I had second team All-American, not Joey Porter, but Joey Porter had a great season. Anyway, we're getting off track. Utah losing 2 of their big players, that really hurts. Kyle Whittingham and their pursuit of winning the Rose Bowl. Penn State, meanwhile, they played a couple of games without Joey Porter. They've played a couple of games without Parker Washington. They know what they have, and they're confident in that depth. And we'll see what kind of depth Utah has. I don't know. I haven't delved into their second and 3 deep tight end situation, but I do know that Dalton Kincaid had 70 catches, over 800 yards for that offense, and was a security blanket for Cam Rising. So it's going to be tough for them to overcome.
Yeah, even without these 4 terrific players, and it's 4 for now. It could be more. It still is. I think this could be the best bowl game. I really do, and I'm talking about the playoffs too. I just think 2 evenly matched teams, 2 just really well coached, well developed teams. 2 teams that play hard for 4 quarters. 2 teams that are deep. 2 teams that are resilient. You look at what Utah did with USC last year. They're not afraid of anyone in the Big Ten. So I just think it has a chance to be a really, really special game. And Penn State's going to need some players to step up, but Utah is too. That's what the Rose Bowl's is kind of all about. It's not only one of the best games this year. It's a springboard for next year, Johnny. I hope you get some sleep this week after the last couple of days between your Eagles, the World Cup, football. See, I'm not even calling it soccer anymore. You guys have trained me right. Player defections, player additions, a potential Christmas Day commit. I mean, I don't know if that's considered coal in your stocking or it's actually a nice present, but I think it's something that maybe you could probably do without. But it's been a hectic December for Penn State. It's been a hectic December for you, and we will have more on Penn State from Media Day, which is supposed to be later this week. Hopefully we'll get to hear from some players at James Franklin. And then don't forget, Penn State fans, a lot coming next week, middle of next week, with the early signing day. But Johnny, catch your breath, and who knows what's coming next? I know you're ready for it, though.
Absolutely, yeah. No, a lot coming, a lot already happened, a lot coming. From media day to signing day to eventually flying out to LA and hanging with you and Joe. It's going to be we're going to have a lot of coverage out there. It's going to be great, and really looking forward to it.
All right, Penn State fans, we'll be back next week with even more information on these Nittany Lions.